In the former Yugoslavia before Karadzic, Milosevic, or Tudjman, and in Weimar Germany before Hitler, there were systemic breakdowns that resulted in the working class being pushed to the fringes of society. The masses were forsaken by liberal elites who abandoned their principles in a scramble to retain power and privilege. By doing so, they no longer allowed the majority to address their grievances within the confines of the established political order. As a result, the working class turned to right-wing charismatic demagogues who, instead of confronting the cause of the collapse, scapegoated the weak and disenfranchised while promising a return to glory. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Chris Hedges writes, "In a traditional democracy, the liberal class functions as a safety valve. It makes piecemeal and incremental reform possible. It offers hope for a change and proposes gradual steps toward greater equality." This safety valve, however, was shut off in 1992 with the election of Bill Clinton. Clinton was a prototype for a new kind of liberal. He famously claimed the era of big government is over and immediately moved to the political center in what he referred to as triangulation. And while he continued to speak in the feel-your-pain language of traditional liberalism, he and the New Democrats began to serve corporate interests. Rather than oppose the power of money in politics, Bill Clinton embraced it, giving the working class nowhere else to turn. All of his major achievements were Republican policies. NAFTA, which outsourced manufacturing jobs and drove down wages for workers while increasing profits for corporations. The Omnibus Crime Bill, which criminalized black life and led to the explosion of private for-profit prisons. Welfare reform, which shredded the nation's social safety net. The Telecommunications Act, which consolidated media power, reducing the 20 companies that controlled the news to 5, and the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which deregulated Wall Street, leading directly to the 2008 crash and giving birth to the contemporary far right. These policies accelerated the transfer of wealth to the 1%. Not understanding what was happening, a betrayed white working class began to scapegoat people of color, Muslims, Jews, immigrants, the LGBTQ communities, and other marginalized groups, which caused liberals to busy themselves with political correctness, identity politics, and boutique activism. In doing so, they abandoned the working class, fully embraced the free market doctrine of Reaganomics, and thus turned Democrats into Republicans, which pushed the Republican Party so far to the right it has, as conservative political scientist Norman Ornstein says, become an insurgent outlier in American politics, ideologically extreme, contemptuous of the inherent social and economic policy regime, scornful of compromise, unmoved by conventional understanding of facts, evidence, and science, and dismissive of the legitimacy of its political opposition. To put the far-right shift in perspective, under Eisenhower, the top marginal tax rate was 92%. Bernie Sanders proposed a top marginal tax rate of 54%. That's how far right the economy has gone. That a moderate Republican from the 1950s was far to the left of a democratic socialist today. In his book, Listen Liberal, Thomas Frank writes, "When the left party in a system severs its bonds to working people, when it dedicates itself to the concerns of a particular slice of high-achieving affluent people, issues of work and income inequality will inevitably fade from its list of concerns." The liberal class's embrace of right-wing policies, its subservience to markets, bailouts for the rich, and the crushing austerity for the poor and working classes has led to a legitimate rage among American workers. And in these moments of unfettered capitalisms, that human beings, as well as the natural world, become nothing more than commodities to exploit until exhaustion or collapse. The U.S. population could not make heads or tails of what was happening to them because the liberal media, which is supposed to check those in power, decided to serve them. The liberal class never addressed the root causes of poverty and injustice in the capitalist system because they benefit so greatly from them. That failure added to the rage and irrationality of the working class's inevitable response. Political dissident Noam Chomsky writes, "I don't bother writing about Fox News. It's too easy. What I want to talk about are liberal intellectuals, the ones who portray themselves and perceive themselves as challenging power, as courageous, as standing up for truth and justice. They are basically the guardians of the faith. They set the limits. They tell us how far we can go. They say, look how courageous I am. But they do not go 1 millimeter beyond that. At least for the educated sectors, they are the most dangerous in supporting power." A betrayed working class who looked, as they historically did, to the liberal establishment for answers and relief found only ridicule, judgment, lecturing, and platitudes from the well-educated technocrats, causing them to look to anyone who would provide answers, no matter how buffoonish. As George Orwell wrote, "It is futile to be anti-fascist while attempting to preserve capitalism. Fascism, after all, is only a development of capitalism." And Vladimir Lenin, who said, "Fascism is capitalism in decay." Liberals prefer the mask of civility and soft Ivy League language when eroding civil liberties, expanding the surveillance state, crushing dissent, using the military to force markets on developing countries, and profiting from the poverty that their capitalist system creates. They hate Trump because he has shattered the comforting illusions their horribly corrupt system has laid bare the internal rot for all to see. Removing Trump will not address the underlying issues that cleared the path for his rise. Electing another polished, educated, well-spoken man to defend a system that causes so much unnecessary and widespread suffering will only result in more Trumps being vomited up. We cannot fight the system by nominating the disease. Malcolm X reminded us in the 1960s, you cannot have capitalism without racism. So before the racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, nationalism, and all other injustices that the bourgeoisie rightfully despise can be addressed, liberals must denounce and dismantle the capitalist system they so assiduously serve. As Chris Hedges wrote, we have to grasp, as Marx and Adam Smith did, that corporations are not concerned with the common good. They exploit, pollute, impoverish, repress, kill, and lie to make money. They throw poor families out of homes, let the uninsured die, wage useless wars to make profits, poison and pollute the ecosystem, slash social assistance programs, gut public education, trash the global economy, plunder the US Treasury, and crush all popular movements that seek justice for working men and women. Thanks for watching.